Hello and welcome to Left on the Table. I'm Bernadette with my co-host,
That's me, Michichick.
and today we're going to have a discussion with another blue dot about another topic that gets thrown out there and gets left on the table. Today's topic is women voting and why it's so important, because we've had a few cases go through the Supreme Court that have been detrimental to women, which are all about women's reproductive rights. And we all know what we're talking about. We're talking about from Roe to Dobbs.
Yes. You know what, Bernadette? We should probably talk about abortion in general in the United States from the early times.
Are you talking about like way back when?
I'm talking about way back when. We're talking about 1800s.
Oh, wow. Tell me about it.
Okay, so we're going to take this little trip back here in time because you know how geeky I am about that. The first anti abortion law prohibiting abortion after what they called quickening, which quickening was the movement of a fetus, was in 1821 in Connecticut. Not sure really why they came up with that. I didn't dig into that full amount, but that was the first time someone actually said, yeah, you can't do that here. Generally, it was permitted at the founding of the United States. But in 1947, there was the formation of the AMA, the American Medical Association. And take note that most doctors were men, but we had women taking care of women called midwives, nurses, and such forth. The AMA took it upon itself to be the authority on all things healthcare, even if they hadn't really focused much on reproductive care previously, because midwives. It launched the first national drive to criminalize abortion. It wasn't really rooted in anything more than an egocentric drive to assume control of healthcare in all manners to that group who had training. They wanted their profession to be exalted above any others. And previous to this, midwifery was the norm and abortions were a part of the services they offered. But in the mid 1800s, some of the more affluent white and mostly Protestant women were using abortion to control the size of their families and even the years in between having children. The generally held religious belief was that the purpose of women was to have babies. The AMA grabbed a hold of that belief and used it as the main focus of their crusade. Along with this was also the beginning of the standardization of medical education, which began in 1870. By 1900, abortion was illegal in every state except for the rare cases where it was approved by a physician. Thus began the rising numbers of deaths as women began seeking illegal abortions or various forms of inducing miscarriage. The transformation was further enhanced by the Flexner Report in 1910. The report urged stricter state laws, stronger standards for medical education, and more rigorous examinations for certifications to practice. The enactment of the recommendations created a near total AMA monopoly of medical education in the United States. Now let's remember who was wanting to control everything everywhere. The men in power of the government. And everything everywhere were the white men who were watching decades of immigration and had concerns of losing their hold on this power and needed to keep women barefoot and pregnant to not lose what little majority they felt they had. Now, barefoot is always a way of saying dependent on a man for all essential needs to survival. That's the way I read it. Jumping forward on the timeline to 1930, there was an effort to track the number of deaths from illegal abortions, and it found that 2,700 women lost their lives directly from the results of abortion. And also note there was approximately 13,500 deaths in total from pregnancy complications. In 1955, Planned Parenthood held its first of a kind conference on the issue of abortion. The doctors who attended made a bold call to action for abortion law reform and said laws should be rewritten to allow doctors greater latitude in services and decisions to improve health care for women, regardless of economic status. As we know, the wealthy have always had money to obtain what they needed. In the late 1950s and early 60s, specifically in 1962, thousands of women took a drug called thalidomide. I think it was originally a sleep enhancing drug, but the side effect also helped reduce morning sickness. But far too late, the absolutely devastating side effect was severe birth defects. And in 1962, a female TV host in Arizona and mother of 4 was seeking an abortion after having ingested thalidomide and could not obtain one in the United States. She traveled to Sweden for health care, and after all the media attention, and yes, death threats and the ugly trappings of thus were prevalent then too, it was found that a full 52% of Americans supported her decision. The push for abortion reforms was ramping up. 1964 saw the first national group, ASA, or Association for the Study of Abortion. Planned Parenthood and doctors joined in advocating for law reforms and studies into safe abortion practices. Strategically advocating for medically necessary abortions on the onset, but members of the larger movement wanted full repeals of abortion laws. 1966 saw the trial of the San Francisco Nine. 9 respected physicians who had been performing abortions on women who had been exposed to rubella, which is the German measles, a disease known to cause birth defects. The medical community across the country came out in defense of the 9, including 128 deans of medical schools. The result was one of the first abortion reform measures in the U.S. California amended its prohibition to allow hospital committees to approve requests for abortion. This was the crack in the plaster of the repeals and reforms. In 1970, New York State legalized abortion. One day later, a Planned Parenthood health center in Syracuse became the first to provide abortion services nationwide. The first 2 years saw that 2/3 of the abortions were for patients that traveled from other states. Which brings us to Roe v. Wade, 1973. And without going into all the trial details, the outcome was that the Supreme Court recognized for the first time that the constitutional right to privacy, quote, is broad enough to encompass a woman's decision whether or not to terminate her pregnancy, unquote. It protected the right to abortion services in all 50 states. And I think there was a lot of people not real happy about that, which brings us to the Hyde Amendment in 1976. The Hyde Amendment, in a nutshell, was a push to not allow for federal funds. In other words, Medicaid, Medicare, any of those funds to be used for abortion. And they pushed that around for quite a while. I think it was finally enacted in, was it 1997? And I'm going to hand the rest of it over to Bernadette. That's just my history lesson today.
Okay. And at this point, I'm going to jump back to 1969 when Roe made history with the Supreme Court, or the Supreme Court made history with Roe, however you want to look at it. In 69, Norma McCovey was pregnant with her 3rd child in the state of Texas where abortion was illegal. And on her behalf, her attorneys filed suit under the pseudonym name of Jane Roe against the district attorney in Texas, Henry Wade, thus the name Roe versus Wade. She alleged that the Texas abortion laws were unconstitutional. A 3-judge panel ruled in her favor, and Wade appealed to the Supreme Court. And in 1973, the Supreme Court came down with a 7-2 judgment in favor of McCovey, Jane Roe, under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which said that she had a fundamental right to privacy and it protected her right to have an abortion. But it also held that there had to be a balance between the government's interest in protecting women's health care and prenatal life. And so they set up what was called a trimester framework, which said that during the first trimester, the woman had a constitutional right to have an abortion, discuss that with her doctor. During the second trimester, unless there was an undue burden with the child, she could still have an abortion up to a certain week number during the pregnancy. After the third trimester, unless it again was an undue burden to the woman, which was to her health, and or she was going to die during having an abortion or something like that. They went for fetal viability. If the child was able to survive outside the womb, then she could not have an abortion. And that stood for 19 years up until 1992, when Planned Parenthood brought a case against the state of Pennsylvania in what's referred to as the Casey decision. Pennsylvania had established an act called the Pennsylvania Control Act, which under that act, there were several things that had to be done in order to have an abortion. You had to have a 24-hour waiting period. That was to allow for alternative information to be given to abortion. There was a parental consent for minors to have an abortion underneath this act. The minor had to get the parents' consent to have the abortion. Also, there was this notification of a woman's husband. If she planned on having an abortion, he had to be notified. Now, that case went to the Supreme Court, and during the argument, the Supreme Court established what's called stare decisis, and we've all heard that, and that effectively upheld Roe as being constitutional, except for some of the requirements of the Pennsylvania Control Act. What they struck out of the Pennsylvania Control Act was the notification of the woman's husband. All the rest of the act, the parental consent, the 24-hour waiting period for alternative information to be given, was upheld. But what was more upheld was a woman's right to privacy and her constitutional right to abortion under stare decisis. It sets precedent, and that's what it was a 5-4 decision from the Supreme Court to uphold Roe and still allowing a woman the right to have an abortion. Now, we jump to present day. In 2018, there was a case out of Mississippi that was brought by an organization called the Alliance Defending Freedom. Mississippi had passed a law banning abortion to 15 weeks. That ban was based on this Alliance for Defending Freedom. They had the clear intent of provoking a case that would be taken all the way to the Supreme Court so that they could establish this extreme ban on abortion at 15 weeks. The court, with the current configuration of a 6-3 conservative situation we are all living under now, heard this case. It was called Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization, and we all know what happened after that. They literally struck down Roe, saying Roe versus Wade was unconstitutional. A woman does not have a constitutional right to an abortion. There are no implied rights in the Constitution that gives a woman the right to an abortion. And so they threw the handling of abortions back to the states. And now we are sitting with every state being able to ban abortions at whatever gestation period. A lot of them are 6 weeks. A lot of them are still at 15 weeks or thereabouts. But at 6 weeks, a woman doesn't even know that she's pregnant yet. Okay? And therein lies the problem. Okay. Today's guest, which we're going to invite to the table and let her say her piece, is Bonita Townsend. We are all familiar with Bonita. She has inspired the Blue Dot family into a campaign that we've picked up and ran with called Do Two for Blue. And Bonita is an extreme activist, and I love her for it. This woman has a list, and she's here to tell you about it. But more importantly, she wants to talk to the young women of America about why it's so important for you to vote blue. Hi, Bonita.
Hi, Bernadette. Thank you for such a gracious introduction. That was so kind of you.
You're welcome. You deserve it, ma'am. I would first like to ask you, how did you find out about the Blue Dot family?
18 months ago, I've been pulling my hair out for almost 9 years. I finally cut it off. But I was looking for information that wasn't disinformation, trying to find out what in the world was going on, trying to figure out what was fact and what wasn't. And I came across John's program. I can listen to this program. No one's, yelling and giving misinformation. Everybody's respectful. And I appreciate everybody's point of view. I appreciate people bringing in new ideas. And we have a cross section of age groups. I appreciate that. And it's more of a family atmosphere, which I really appreciate.
So I know that you are an activist at heart. You sit daily and do things, and I do want you to talk about that. I do want you to let us know what is it that you do and how does somebody go to mimic something like what you do on a daily basis.
I never thought in my lifetime that I would be reading the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and looking up Supreme Court cases as much as I have the last 9 years. When Donnie got elected, it was like, oh my goodness, the house is on fire and we need to do something. And I always have a list anyway, but my list just got expanded to all 50 states.
But is it true that you have like 75 things on your list that you do on a monthly basis?
Yes, I'll read you a few of the names on my list. Warnock, Booker, Tina Smith, Mandela, Kuntz, Whittemer, Patty Murray, Fetterman, Katie Porter, Ossoff, Golden, Massey, Duckworth, Markley, Marcis, Casey, Maggie, uh, and that would be where Hassan in New Hampshire.
You're writing them letters, you're sending them money, you're conversating with these people, or what?
I am sending them money. I am making phone calls. I am writing postcards. I try to get governors that are running Democrat,
Hmm.
and also those groups that are supporting blue, like 314 Action Fund and Common Cause and Planned Parenthood and Emily's List and Turnout and Restricting and Indivisible and Move On. There are so many things. These are all on my list, plus about 40 more.
Oh my goodness, you are amazing.
It's just people
Amazing.
need to be out there doing something. You have no spare minutes. If you've got spare minutes, you should be doing something. It doesn't take long to make a phone call. It doesn't take long to call the comment line at the White House and let President Biden know. I really appreciate all these good things you're doing. The economy is doing really good. I got a raise in my retirement because the 401k is doing awesome. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that my friends who are diabetic now can afford insulin and don't have to ration it. I appreciate all of these construction jobs going up. The job boom. People in the Rust Belt are no longer, in the Rust Belt. You got all kinds of businesses going up, and nobody seems to be talking a lot about it.
Well, we are, and you
Yes, we
are,
are.
and you are actually out there pounding the pavement, doing something from the comfort of your own home. And see,
Yeah,
folks, that's how easy it is. You could do it in the comfort of your own home. And
yeah,
the most you have to do is get out and go to the post office and drop off some postcards or a letter or two.
Benita, can I ask a question?
yes.
based on your life experience with freedoms and or removal of freedoms, how is that motivating you or more motivating you to motivate others? You saw the gains and losses, and you're looking at what? A lot more losses now?
I am looking at a lot more losses. And I tell you, this Dobbs decision really toasted my tuchus because, listen to me, women, it wasn't Ozzie and Harriet back in the 40s and 50s when I grew up. Women had very few rights. I was 20, almost 22 when I finished school. I couldn't even rent my own apartment. My dad had to sign the lease because I was a female. Do you know how humiliating that is? That I'm less than a man? I couldn't have my own checking account. It wasn't until 1974 on the Equal Credit Act that I was able to get a charge card.
That's amazing. I don't think that a lot of young ladies nowadays realize 1974 was not that long ago.
It is
If
not, Bernadette.
No, no. And if you're a young woman out there with your own apartment, with your own car, doing your thing, making money and all the rest of that, we're talking about your mom's era
Put
or
it
your
in
grandma's
perspective.
era.
I was
Yeah.
30 years old when I got a charge card. 30. Is that where you ladies want to go back to, where you have no rights?
Hell no. I will speak up for a whole bunch of ladies. Hell no.
No, I don't need somebody, if you're married, you're in a partnership. It is not a dictatorship where one tells you what to do. I don't know. It just boggles my mind. It was, what year was Clinton when he signed the Violence Act against women? That was what, 1994, when Clinton signed the Violence Against Women. Up until that time, ladies, do you know that it was perfectly fine for your husband or boyfriend or male friend to beat on you? Do you realize that in my lifetime, it was acceptable? It was always the woman's fault. You didn't do your wifely duties. You looked too sexy. You were too mouthy. It is always on the woman. I resent this. And I resent a lot that's going on now. I resent my rights being stripped of again. I have fought hard to get where I was. And now I'm having to fight that fight again. And I am really ticked at it. I can't tell you how angry I am at this. And you should be angry too about this Dobbs decision. You should be on the phone. You should be writing postcards. You should be sending $2 here and there, because the next president is going to be picking Supreme Court justices. And that matters, ladies. You have to know the importance of the Supreme Court. They may be doing a terrible job right now, but we need to get some judges on that Supreme Court. And we don't want the ones that are going to be coming with Donald Trump or the Republican Party.
No, we
You need
don't,
to vote
because
blue.
that's going to make for an even more conservative court. The next president is going to seat another Supreme Court justice during his tenure at some point during
Yes,
his
he is.
tenure, or her tenure. We don't know that yet. Um, who they sit on that court is going to affect everything about the United States. And we have already seen how that's possible. And so I don't know. I personally think I would rather have a more liberal person sitting another liberal judge and bring it down to at least 5-4. That gives us a more equal chance of just being overruled and walked over by the conservative court that is unethical at best right now.
I would like to see a court that takes into consideration what the people of the United States, the people, want, not what they deem is good for their religious beliefs. but the people want. That's who they're supposed to represent.
What I essentially see is, even though, a lot of people will pick one issue to be their voting issue, but abortion isn't just about abortion. It's a it's about taking away freedoms. And in particular, this is 50% of the US population we're talking about taking away their freedom. Women. Women losing freedom.
The 14th Amendment, and it's so funny that we're all of this abortion thing is under the 14th Amendment. Now, if you haven't read the 14th Amendment, there are several sections of the 14th Amendment. I believe there's 5. Okay? Go out and do some research because it's extremely important. The right to privacy, a fundamental right to privacy, which we all seem to believe that we have, was not given until the 14th Amendment. Equal protection under the law, another right that we think that we all have. We're talking about women being protected just as much as men being protected, blacks being protected just as much as whites being protected, and every rainbow color in between. Okay, all under the 14th Amendment. We're talking about kicking somebody off the ballot because of insurrection or their behavior towards the Constitution of the United States or their oath of office, all under the 14th Amendment. And there's more out there. But the right to privacy, your fundamental right to privacy, and your right to due process in the courts, also under the 14th Amendment. All of this under the 14th Amendment. If you don't know your Constitution, now's the time to go out there and find out what exactly is it that they're trying to take away from you. Because if you think it's just abortion, guess again.
Yes.
Women out there need to understand that pregnancy comes with complications,
Mhm.
and those complications need medical care. Women are finding they can't get medical care because doctors are terrified of being fined and going to jail. And some states are even saying they should be executed.
They're in a lot of red states right now. There are doctors who have been practicing. That's all they went to school for, was to practice to do women's health care, gynecological services, which involves more than just being pregnant. Um, Cancer research of the cervix is involved in all of this. There is so much more than being pregnant. Your right to your own, the privacy of your own medical files are being tested under these abortion, so-called abortion banning laws all across the state. We have doctors that are leaving their states and the profession because they don't want to be charged with something like murder. Yeah,
Mhm.
murder. Women can be charged for murder for having an abortion, or maybe even a spontaneous abortion, which is sometimes characterized as a miscarriage. There was a young lady, Brittany Watts, in Ohio, who was recently um, arrested for having a spontaneous abortion. Fortunately, the grand jury there did not indict her, but the district attorney in that state had her toilet removed as evidence. The toilet from her house. Do you understand that this woman is suffering trauma from having this spontaneous abortion at home, which she had gone to emergency twice before, and they sent her home. She was bleeding. What else was she supposed to do?
Yeah, and Bernadette, let's not forget those women in Texas, the 5 that are suing the state of
Yes,
Texas. Miss Cox, who was told she couldn't leave the state.
had to leave, and she already has 2 children, and she was having a child that had known birth defects and would not survive once it was born. Yet they were going to force her to carry this child to either her death or a spontaneous abortion or her birthing a stillbirth child or a child that died shortly after birth. This
Yeah,
is ridiculous. Women are not. It's hard, and women can die in a good pregnancy just giving birth. Just giving
Mhm.
birth. They can bleed to death just giving birth. And a
Women, you
lot of
have
women
to
do.
pay attention to what Bernadette is just saying. Pregnancy, as I said, is not complication free. It
No.
comes with a lot of risk. And if you're at risk, no one's going to help you. They tell you to go to the parking lot till you're bleeding out so bad you're on door's death step.
Or they tell you have to be septic. Septic, do you know what that means? That means poison is running through your bloodstream in your body. Not only will it make you septic, it will make the fetus septic too. And how are either one of them supposed to survive at that point?
Bernadette, it just sets my hair on fire that men should be concerned for the women they love that are facing this situation and be out there and as proactive as they possibly can for women's rights to privacy. I don't want 100 or umpteen men in my office when I talk to the doctor. They don't need
I
to be
agree.
making my medical decisions. I'm a grown woman. I can make my own. I resent the fact that they took that right away from me. I really angers me, and I don't know why. Every woman in America, I don't care what stripe you are, you should be really livid about being stripped of a right you had for 50 years, women. This
Yeah,
is important. You need to listen up and take some action. They want to take us back to the 1800s. You do realize, women, that we didn't even get to vote until 1920.
that's correct.
1920. So that means they're going to take us back before we had that right. We're going to end up with no rights at all if we don't vote. You need to
And
get
vote blue.
active. Yes,
And vote
vote
blue.
blue.
Because the
Vote blue
Republicans,
across the board. I don't care if you got a one issue that you're uncomfortable with or you don't like or you want this. I don't care. You have to vote blue across the board because you're voting for democracy. You're voting for your rights. Your rights are on the table, women, and you need to wake up and realize that. We are at a crisis in our government. And I don't know how to tell you more passionately than I am that this is going to be a turning point for us. And we're going to either hopefully gain that right back or we're going to lose more. So I'm going to entrust this to you women out there that you're really going to contemplate this seriously. Think about your daughters and granddaughters and future generations. Where do you want them to be? Do you want them to be healthy? Do you want them to be free to make their own decisions, to handle their own money, to get an education? Or you want us to go back to the 1800s?
speaking of the 1800s, I'm looking at the Comstock Act, which was a set of laws that were passed in 1873 for the suppression of trade in and the circulation of obscene literature and articles of immoral use. And one of the things that they thought to be obscene and immoral were contraceptives. And this particular act, the Comstock Act, which is antiquated as hell, is one of the acts that the Republican Party is dead set on reinstating in the United States. Now, how do they go about doing this? Recently, there was a argument in front of the Supreme Court, and I'm talking about within the last couple of weeks of the Chevron deference. And what is the Chevron deference? Michichick, you did a whole thing on the Chevron deference. Could you explain that to us real quick?
Well, in a very small nutshell, the actual case that brought up the Chevron difference is about some fishermen and being regulated and told when they can or cannot be out in their boats and do what they do or whatever. It's federal regulations and whatnot. And the original Chevron case had to do with the oil industry, obviously Chevron, which included some regulations and whatnot. But by trying to repeal or remove this, it would literally take down or leave open the possibility to take down things like the FDA, any regulations that keep the air clean, the water clean, us safe, food regulations
So
across the board.
we're talking about any governmental agency that provides governmental regulation for the benefit of the people of the United States and or the environment. Correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. That being said, should the Chevron deference case get decided where federal government agencies no longer have the right to regulate industries as to whether they're polluting or endangering the people of the United States of America, this opens the door for the FDA to be taken down, and that opens the door for this Comstock Act to be reimposed upon America to stop two things: contraceptions, the sale of contraceptions in America. Okay, we're talking about, you know, IUDs, uh,
The pill.
birth control, and things like that. Maybe even as far as condoms, okay? And to stop the sale of things like Plan B, which allows the woman to be able to have an abortion in her home, in the privacy of her own home. That's what they're after, is to stop the sale of mifepristone.
Yes.
Judge Thomas on the Supreme Court has already said he's opening to accepting a case on contraception. Be aware, people out there. This is
Yes,
on their agenda.
Yeah.
yes, this is very much on their agenda. They have the judges already in place to strike these things down. They got there by Republican presidents being able to stack the court because they had a long game plan, and this has been a part of the Republican game plan for for forever. For
And
forever. And now that we have MAGA Mike, preacher of the house, sitting in the position that he's sitting in, which was also planned. There was no fluke that Mike Johnson is Speaker of the House right now. That is not a fluke. Don't even think that he came after Scalia and everybody else failed to garner votes. They always had him in the background working on these things, and he was destined to become preacher of the house. Y'all wake up. Project 2025 is in full effect. They've been putting people in place for a long time. Trump is a tool. They will use the hell out of him to get what they want. We can't allow that to happen.
But you know
We
what,
can't.
Bernadette?
What, Michichick?
That's a whole nother discussion for left on
Yes,
the
it is.
table.
It is another issue on the table. That is, you are correct about that.
I just wanted to bring up again and inform everybody, men and women, that pregnant women are being restricted from leaving their own state, which is
Mhm.
illegal in itself. States are starting to talk about tracking women's menstrual periods, which I think is disgusting and invasion of privacy.
They're asking for medical records.
Yeah, medical
States are
records too.
asking for medical records of women.
And why is people not up in arms over this? I do not understand. I am jumping up and down, doing everything I can on paper and on the phone and talking to people about you got to do something. It is, you don't have time just to say, well, I should. No, there's no should. It's you've got to get on the ball, people, and do it now. There is no tomorrow. If you don't do something today, tomorrow is going to be an afterthought because it's never going to get here. You need to be doing something. Get a list made. Get yourself organized. Get in a routine. Say, well, from this time to this time is strictly I'm going to be proactive and do something for blue. You need to get yourself in gear, everybody. I don't know how much plainer I can make it.
I appreciate that, Benita. And I don't know how much plainer you can make it either. I do understand we have busy lives. We got to make ends meet. It does mean, you got to go to work. You got to get the kids ready. You got to do everything else that you got to do. But it is imperative that we vote and we vote properly because if we don't, this could be our last vote, y'all. And that's not me just being, hyperbole. It's
No, it's
not
not.
hyperbole. It is the honest to God truth. I mean, I almost want to petition the UN to come in and monitor the vote. Okay, seriously, I want a purple finger to say I voted and it was legal and it's okay. And I'm serious about that. I'm serious about the UN coming in and monitoring. Come on, let's work with me. The election because so many people think that it's already rigged. It's not. We had the most fair and free election the last time around when Donald Trump lost what he calls the big lie that he's been spewing since 2020 and even prior to that. It is run like wildfire throughout this country. Okay, and the man has 91 felony charges against him, and they want to re-elect him president. But he is a tool. Project 2025 is in full effect, and we need to be aware of it. If you haven't seen that or know what it is, project2025.org, go find out about it. Do some research. Find out why right now we need to start promoting blue, and let's not be just a one issue voter. Be informed. One issue should not make or break your vote. We are talking about things that are going to affect you for the rest of your life.
If you
And
are going to be a one issue voter, your one issue should be your freedom
Yes,
to vote, or freedom for democracy. And the only way to do that is to not vote for a Republican, not vote for an independent, which will just give a vote to someone else. So vote blue wherever you are, all the way down. It's the only way to save this wonderful experiment that we call democracy.
yeah,
I would like to address those youngsters, and I mean those that are younger, that are just turning 18. Get registered
absolutely.
to vote, people. It is important, it is imperative that you vote. You're voting for your future. Your future is on the line. You carry a lot of sway. You are knowledgeable, and I'm depending on you. You voters out there that think, oh, my vote doesn't count. Let me tell you this, your vote is so important. Do you realize that some of our elections are won by one or two votes? One or two people. You need to know your vote is important. I don't want you to feel that you're not. You are. I am depending on you. America's depending on you. Women are depending on you to get the vote out. I need for you to grab a neighbor. I need for you to grab a friend. Don't go to the polls by yourself. Make sure if you got mail in ballots that everybody in your neighborhood is filling out their ballot and putting it in their mailbox. Get active, do something. There is always something to do. You don't have to leave your house to do something. If you don't have money, I understand that. You don't have to be sending people money. You can be making phone calls. You can be writing postcards. You can be supportive of young people and telling them to get up there and register to vote. You could be telling your stories of how it was when you were growing up and how women were treated and how we're still treated to this day and looked on as almost second class citizens. Now we are second class because rights have been stripped of us. And I don't know why more people aren't out there. You should be out there doing something. Please, people, I need for you to get out there and do something for our future generations, for yourself.
Thank you, Benita.
Benita is a firecracker, and if she doesn't inspire you to get out and vote, I don't know what will. Okay? Thank you, Benita, for coming and sitting with us at Left on the Table and discussing this extremely important issue that always gets left on the table. And I'm quite sure that we'll have you back to discuss it one more time before we get out the vote. She's right, people. It's a republic if we can keep it. And it is extremely important. And it's up to all of us to do our part. It's our turn to save this country and save democracy. Anything else, ladies?
I just want to make a quick note of my references for my information at the top.
Mhm.
I went to PlannedParenthoodAction.org for a lot of the history of the U.S. Abortion in the U.S. And there was also the University of California, San Francisco Center for Reproductive Health Research and Policy had quite a bit on what California has done. But history is history, and we should learn by history. And
Absolutely. And
here we
you
are
know,
making history again.
I went to Wikipedia because Wikipedia is out there, gathered a lot of knowledge. But I've also read the Constitution, and what I know about the Constitution, I've read for with my own two eyes and deciphered with my own brain. Um, so there you have it. Go get you a copy of the Constitution. It's not that big. Read it so you can understand what your rights are in this country and why it's so important. If your vote wasn't so important, they wouldn't be trying to suppress it so much.
Bingo.
And with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening to Left on the Table. We'll be back at some future date with another Blue Dot family guest. All right. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Bernadette.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Bonita, for stopping by. Today's episode was hosted by Bernadette Pree and Michichick. The music is from John Lawrence. You can find his music over at jhlawrence.bandcamp.com. Left on the Table and all other programming on the Blue Dot in Texas channel is made possible by the kind donations from the Blue Dot family. If you would like to support our channel, you can find out how over at bluedotintexas.com. Thanks again for listening, and remember to keep using your voice, make that list, and vote.